When a dirt-streaked little boy bursts into an ER late at night, crying, the staff initially assume it's just a tragic medical emergency. But as the pieces come together, they uncover a truth far darker than they could have imagined. Before we dive into this gripping tale, let us know where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The emergency room hummed with activity, a constant flow of voices, beeping monitors, and hurried footsteps echoing under fluorescent lights. Elena Morrow, a seasoned nurse, stood at the nurse's station reviewing patient charts when the automatic doors hissed open. Her eyes flicked up instinctively, and what she saw made her heart drop. A small boy, no older than 7, stumbled inside. He clutched a worn toy in one hand, his other arm hanging limply at his side, revealing faint purple bruises along his pale skin. His dark hair was tangled, his shirt smeared with dirt, and tears streaked his flushed cheeks. "Help! My grandpa isn't moving," the boy cried, his voice cracking with desperation. Elena immediately dropped the clipboard and hurried toward him, kneeling to meet the child's eye level. "Sweetheart, you're safe now," she said gently but firmly. "What's your name?" "Luke," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible over the bustling "er." "Hi, Luke. I'm Elena. Can you tell me what happened to your grandpa?" Luke's lips trembled as he tried to explain. I tried to wake him up, but he wouldn't move. There were loud noises, and I hid under the table." He hugged his toy tighter, his knuckles white against its worn fabric. Elena's chest tightened. "Loud noises? What kind of noises?" "Luke, yelling and things breaking," Luke said, his voice barely a whisper. Elena kept her expression calm despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. She reached for the radio clipped to her uniform. "We need paramedics dispatched immediately to this address," she said, rattling off the location Luke had provided through his sobs. "Potential assault. 1 unconscious adult." Luke flinched at the word assault, but Elena's hand gently touched his shoulder. "Luke, the paramedics are on their way. They're going to take care of your grandpa and bring him here. Can you stay with me and help make sure he's okay?" Luke nodded hesitantly, though his wide, tear-filled eyes darted around the room as if searching for reassurance. "Good boy," Elena said softly. She guided Luke to a quieter corner of the ER, away from the curious eyes of other patients. "You're very brave for coming here, Luke. You did the right thing." Luke sniffled, his small frame trembling. "Will he be okay?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "The doctors will do everything they can to help him," Elena promised, though her mind churned with unease. She crouched beside Luke, meeting his gaze. "Did you see the people who were yelling?" Luke froze for a moment, then shook his head. "I just heard them," he murmured, clutching his toy even tighter. "I didn't look. Grandpa told me to hide." The radio crackled on Elena's hip, making Luke jump. "Paramedics on scene. 1 unconscious male, approximately late 60s, significant bruising, possible head trauma, signs of a struggle. Overturned furniture, broken glass. Transporting now." Elena's breath caught in her throat. "Copy that. Prepare trauma room 3 for arrival," she said into the radio before turning back to Luke. "Your grandpa's on his way here, Luke," she said gently. "The doctors are ready to take care of him. You're safe now, and we'll figure this out together." Luke nodded, but his face crumpled as fresh tears spilled over his cheeks. He didn't wake up," he said, his voice breaking. "I tried and tried." Elena pulled a blanket from a nearby supply cart, draping it over Luke's small shoulders. "I know it's scary," she said, "but you're not alone, Luke. I'll be right here with you." The ER doors burst open minutes later, and a stretcher was wheeled in, paramedics flanking both sides. Ross, his face pale and bruised, lay motionless under an oxygen mask. Elena glanced at Luke, who stiffened and stared at his grandfather's frail form. "He's in good hands now," Elena said, her voice calm but firm. She placed a hand on Luke's back, guiding him away from the chaos of the trauma team swarming Ross. "Let the doctors do their job. You've done so much to help him already." Luke didn't respond, his tear-streaked face a mask of fear and guilt. Elena stayed by his side, offering quiet reassurance even as her own mind raced. The paramedic's description of the scene, overturned furniture, broken glass, bruising, painted a grim picture. This wasn't just a medical emergency. Something far more sinister had happened at that house. As Ross was rushed into the trauma room, Elena glanced back at Luke, vowing to uncover the truth. Whatever had happened, this little boy needed someone to protect him, and Elena wouldn't let him down. Detective Connor Hayes arrived at the small suburban home, the wail of a siren fading into the distance as the patrol car pulled away. The house stood under the dim glow of a streetlight, its door ajar like a gaping wound on the modest single-story structure. Hayes's sharp eyes scanned the exterior. Neatly trimmed hedges, a mailbox with Ross Whitman stenciled in neat letters, and a shattered living room window. Something was very wrong. Stepping cautiously over the threshold, Hayes surveyed the scene. The entryway was littered with shards of glass, and muddy footprints trailed from the broken window toward the back door, which was still swinging slightly on its hinges. Inside, the chaos told the story of a violent intrusion. Furniture overturned, drawers yanked out, papers scattered across the floor. A broken lamp lay in pieces near the sofa, its bulb crushed underfoot. Hayes crouched to examine the footprints and pulled out his phone to snap a photo. The prints were uneven, with a slight drag to the right foot, suggesting one of the intruders had an injury or limp. "Detective, over here," called an officer from the dining room. Hayes straightened and followed the voice, stepping carefully over the debris. In the dining room, an open china cabinet revealed its shelves emptied haphazardly, with fine porcelain plates and heirloom glassware smashed on the ground. On the table sat an upended box of photographs and documents. Hayes picked up a crumpled sheet, scanning its contents. A bill of sale for a property from years ago. The paper seemed unimportant, but its placement among the mess hinted at something deliberate. The intruders hadn't been looking for cash or valuables. They had been searching for something specific. Hayes's phone buzzed in his pocket. He answered quickly, the hospital's number flashing on the screen. "Hayes," he said curtly. "Detective, it's Elena Morrow," came the voice on the other end, calm but laced with urgency. "Ross is still unconscious, but I'm with Luke. The little boy is terrified." He mentioned hearing the men yelling at his grandfather. Hayes stepped out of the dining room, lowering his voice. "Did he say anything about what they were after?" "Not exactly," Elena replied, "but he said his grandfather told him to hide under the table when the men came in. He overheard one of them saying, 'We don't have much time.'" Hayes nodded, filing the information away. "Keep him safe, Elena. I'll follow up as soon as I can." Ending the call, he re-entered the living room, where another officer approached. "Detective, a neighbor's awake and says they saw something." Hayes nodded. "Let's hear it." The officer led him outside, where an elderly man stood on the sidewalk, arms folded over his chest against the chill. "You're the detective?" the man asked, his voice gravelly. "That's right, Detective Connor Hayes. Can you tell me what you saw?" The man nodded, squinting as he spoke. "I was up late watching the news when I saw two men running out of Ross's house. They got into a black SUV. Looked like one of those fancy ones and sped off. Did you get a license plate?" Hayes asked, hopeful. The man shook his head. "Too dark and they were moving fast. But I did notice one of the men was limping, like he hurt his leg or something." Hayes jotted down the details in his notebook. "That's helpful. Anything else?" "Just that they didn't seem like amateurs," the man said. "They moved quick, like they knew what they were doing." Hayes nodded in thanks, handing the man a card. "If you remember anything else, give me a call." Returning to the house, Hayes joined the forensics team now combing the scene. "Bag those footprints," he directed, gesturing toward the muddy marks near the window. "And get me prints off any surfaces they might have touched." The forensics lead, a wiry woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, approached with an update. "Detective, we found fragments of a phone near the sofa. Looks like it was smashed deliberately. We'll try to recover data." Hayes's gut tightened. Whoever these men were, they'd come prepared. Smashing the phone likely meant Ross had tried to call for help. He turned back to the dining room, his eyes scanning the scattered papers. Whatever they were after, he muttered to himself, they didn't find it. Back at the hospital, Elena Morrow sat beside Luke in a quiet corner of the waiting room, holding a warm cup of cocoa in her hands. Luke stared at the cup but didn't drink, his small body rigid with tension. "Do you think Grandpa will wake up soon?" Luke asked softly. Elena leaned closer, her voice soothing. "The doctors are doing everything they can. He's strong, Luke, just like you." Luke nodded, his fingers gripping the edge of his toy. "The men, they were mad at him." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Elena asked gently, not wanting to push but needing to understand. "They kept yelling," Luke said, his voice trembling. "They said he should have told them where something was." Elena frowned, alarmed by the revelation but careful not to show it. "Did they say what they were looking for?" Luke shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I don't know," Grandpa said to hide. "I didn't look." Elena wrapped her arms around Luke, holding him tightly. "You're so brave, Luke. I'm here, and I won't let anything happen to you." Detective Connor Hayes sat at his desk in the precinct, the dim glow of his computer screen casting long shadows on the walls. The scene at Ross Whitman's house replayed in his mind, the overturned furniture, the muddy footprints, the shattered lamp. It wasn't random. Whoever broke in had a purpose, and they were willing to use violence to achieve it. Hayes leaned forward, typing Ross Whitman into the department's database. The search returned a long list of documents, but one flagged file immediately caught his attention: Whitman, Ross E. Confidential Witness, Financial Crimes Division. Hayes clicked on the file, his brow furrowing as he skimmed the contents. Ross had been the key whistleblower in an ongoing case against Donovan, a high-profile financier facing embezzlement charges. The accusations centered on Donovan's siphoning of millions from his investment firm, leaving countless clients defrauded. Ross, a former accountant at the firm, had discovered the irregularities and turned over crucial evidence to authorities. Donovan, Hayes muttered under his breath. The name was notorious in financial and criminal circles. The case had made headlines months ago, but it was far from over. Ross's testimony and the evidence he provided were set to dismantle Donovan's empire, and Hayes now suspected it had made him a target. At the scene, Hayes gathered his team for a quick debrief. "We've got two men, one with a limp, driving a black SUV. They were looking for something specific, but they didn't find it. Ross likely knows what it is, but he can't tell us yet." "And the little boy?" one officer asked. "He's safe at the hospital," Hayes replied. "But he heard enough to confirm this wasn't a random break-in. We need to figure out what these men wanted, and fast. Why did the men attack Ross? Is he really just a harmless elderly man?" Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you think Luke's bravery in going to the ER alone was incredible, give this video a like. Will Ross recover? Will justice prevail? Stay tuned to find out. In the forensic lab, Detective Hayes reviewed the latest updates from the crime scene on a large monitor. Images of partial fingerprints lifted from Ross's home flashed on the screen. The lead forensic analyst, Jessica Torres, gestured at one match highlighted in green. "We got a hit," Torres said. "Partial print from the broken lamp matches a known associate in Donovan's network, Liam Grant. He's been flagged in multiple investigations for extortion, intimidation, and assault." Grant, Hayes said, his voice grim, fits the description of one of the intruders. A limp, muddy boots, no hesitation to get violent. Torres nodded. "He's Donovan's muscle." If Grant was at the scene, this wasn't a random robbery. They were looking for something. Hayes leaned closer to the screen, studying Grant's mugshot. The man's face was hardened, his narrow eyes suggesting a mix of cunning and ruthlessness. "What about the other prints?" "No solid matches yet," Torres replied, "but we're still running them through the database. Grant's enough to connect this to Donovan's operation." Hayes's jaw tightened. The connection between Ross and Donovan wasn't just circumstantial, it was motive. Donovan had everything to lose if the embezzlement case proceeded, and Ross was a direct threat to his freedom. If Donovan was behind this, Retaliation wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Back at the hospital, Ross remained unconscious, his frail body hooked to machines that monitored his vitals. In a nearby waiting room, Luke sat curled on a chair, his toy still clutched tightly in his arms. Nurse Elena Morrow sat beside him, a warm, non-nonsense presence in the midst of chaos. "Do you think Grandpa will wake up soon?" Luke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "The doctors are doing everything they can. He's very strong, Luke, and I know he's fighting to come back to you." Luke nodded, though his small face remained drawn with worry. "Grandpa said bad people might come," he murmured. "He told me not to answer the door if he wasn't there." Elena's heart ached at the quiet revelation. "You're a brave boy, Luke," she said, reaching out to smooth the child's hair. "You've done so much to help your grandpa already. The police are going to make sure those bad people don't hurt him again." It took the jury only a handful of hours to deliberate. The courtroom fell into an expectant hush as the judge read the final judgment on the counts of conspiracy, corruption, trafficking, and the murder of Officer Logan Carter. This court finds the defendant, Grant Barber, guilty on all charges. Angela squeezed Jake's hand as relief and grief swept through her. Justice was served, but the price was unimaginable. Sentencing came quickly, the judge's voice firm as she addressed Grant. "Your abuse of the badge entrusted to you by the community is horrific. You used your authority to harm the very people you were sworn to protect. This court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." As Grant was led away, he shot one final venomous look at Angela and Jake, a mixture of rage and resignation on his face. Jake refused to avert his eyes, meeting Grant's malevolence with unwavering resolve. Outside, Angela and Jake were greeted by a throng of supporters and reporters. Flashes popped. Microphones were thrust forward. Angela lifted a hand to quiet them. "We're not here for publicity," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "We're here because justice matters. My husband gave his life for what's right, and my son risked his own life for the same cause. We honor their courage today." They stepped away only to be joined by Agent Price. She regarded Jake with a proud smile. "You did so well in there. Your testimony changed everything." Jake looked down, modest. "I only told the truth." Price placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes that's the most courageous thing of all." On a crisp Sunday afternoon, Angela and Jake opted to visit the local park. It was one of those perfect spring days, the kind Logan would have adored. The sky shone brilliantly, and the breeze carried a hint of blossoming flowers. They meandered along the winding footpaths, Jake idly kicking small stones, deep in thought. Angela ambled beside him, patient and ready to listen. Eventually, Jake broke the silence. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you think Dad realized how much we loved him?" Angela stopped, turning so they were eye to eye. "Oh, Jake," she said softly, resting a hand on his cheek. "He knew every day. That was what kept him going. He wanted a better world for us." Jake nodded, blinking away tears. "I miss him." "So do I," Angela whispered, pulling him into a close hug. "But I see him in you, his goodness, his bravery, his heart. He'd be so proud of who you've become." As the sun dropped, setting the park aglow with amber light, they found a bench where they could watch children laughing on the swings and slides, their carefree giggles a reminder of the innocence worth fighting for. "Will life ever be normal?" Jake asked softly, eyes on the distant horizon. Angela inhaled, weighing her answer. "I think our normal has changed," she said, "but that doesn't mean we can't find happiness again. Moving forward doesn't mean forgetting your dad. It means honoring him by living our lives." Jake offered a faint grin. "I think I understand." They stood, setting off on the path home. Jake turned to his mother, a thoughtful look on his face. "Dad would be proud, right?" Angela draped an arm around his shoulders as they walked. "He'd be proud of both of us," she said firmly, her voice tinged with fondness. The Carter family was no longer the same, but they had emerged stronger from the battles they had fought. Angela and Jake moved forward, keeping Logan's memory alive in their hearts as they forged a new beginning. As they strolled toward the light of their home, the sun setting behind them, the future felt a bit more hopeful, and for the first time in a long while, they sensed true peace. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like. If you haven't already, subscribe for more. Hayes returned to his desk, Grant's mugshot still etched in his mind. He picked up his phone and dialed a number, waiting as it rang. "Captain," Hayes said when the line connected, "we've got a suspect. Liam Grant, tied to Donovan's network. I'm requesting authorization to bring him in for questioning." "You're sure about the connection?" the captain asked. "Ross Whitman is a whistleblower in Donovan's embezzlement case," Hayes explained. "Grant's print was found at his house. This wasn't a random break-in. They were looking for something. Likely evidence Ross is holding on to." The captain was silent for a moment, then sighed. "All right, but tread carefully. Donovan's got deep pockets and plenty of lawyers. We can't afford a misstep." "I understand," Hayes said. "I'll keep you updated." As he hung up, Hayes's resolve hardened. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the clock was ticking. Grant's involvement confirmed the break-in wasn't a one-off. This was part of something larger, and Ross's life was still in danger. Hayes prepared for the next steps, pulling Grant's file and coordinating with his team. "We've got a lead," he announced in the precinct's briefing room. "Liam Grant. We need to locate him and bring him in." One officer raised a hand. "Any idea where he might be hiding?" "Grant's last known address is an apartment in Eastwood," Hayes replied, "but he's likely on the move. We canvass his usual haunts, bars, motels, anywhere low profile. Start with Eastwood and expand outward." "What about Donovan?" another officer asked. "Donovan won't leave a direct trail," Hayes said. "But if we apply pressure to Grant, he might crack. Let's move." Detective Connor Hayes gripped the wheel tightly as he maneuvered his unmarked car through the dimly lit streets on the city's outskirts. His partner, Officer Jenna Sanchez, sat beside him, scanning their surroundings for signs of their target, Liam Grant. Donovan's muscle and the only solid lead they had. Grant was holed up in a seedy motel known for sheltering criminals on the run. "Room 14, Sanchez said, double-checking her notes. "Second floor, end of the row." Hayes nodded, pulling into the motel's gravel lot. The building was run down, its neon vacancy sign flickering ominously in the night. A handful of cars were scattered in the lot, one of which matched the description of the vehicle Grant had been spotted driving. "Let's keep this quiet," Hayes said, stepping out of the car. "If he bolts, it's on us." Sanchez nodded, following him as they approached the staircase. Backup officers fanned out across the lot, ensuring all exits were covered. Hayes's radio crackled softly as the team confirmed their positions. As they neared room 14, Sanchez drew her weapon, her eyes sharp and focused. Hayes knocked on the door, his tone firm but calm. "Liam Grant, this is the police. We need to talk." For a moment, there was silence. Then the sound of hurried movement inside made Hayes's heart race. "He's running," he muttered, stepping back just as the door burst open. Grant, a stocky man with a noticeable limp, barreled out of the room, shoving past Hayes and Sanchez. His eyes were wild, his face slick with sweat. "Stop!" Sanchez shouted, giving chase as Grant stumbled down the stairs, favoring his injured leg. Hayes followed close behind, adrenaline surging. "Grant, you're only making this worse," he yelled. But the man didn't stop. Grant reached the lot and made a beeline for his car, but a patrol officer stepped into his path, weapon drawn. "Don't move," the officer barked. Grant hesitated, his gaze darting between the officer and his vehicle. Before he could decide, Sanchez tackled him from behind, pinning him to the ground. "Stay down," she ordered, slapping cuffs onto his wrists as he struggled. Hayes caught up, breathing heavily. "Nice work," he said to Sanchez, then turned to Grant. "You've got a lot to answer for." Grant glared up at him, his face twisted in defiance. "I don't know what you're talking about." "We'll see about that," Hayes said coldly. "Get him in the car." Back at the precinct, Grant sat in the interrogation room, his hands cuffed to the table. Hayes and Sanchez watched from behind the two-way mirror as he slouched in his chair, refusing to meet the gaze of the officer questioning him. "He's not gonna crack," Sanchez said. "Guys like him never do." "He doesn't have to," Hayes replied. "We've got his phone in the evidence room." Hayes and the forensic team pored over Grant's burner phone, which had been confiscated during his arrest. Most of the messages were vague, but one thread stood out. "Need the documents. Read one message. Safe is still a problem. Read another." Hayes's stomach twisted. "He's talking about Ross," he said. "Whatever he's holding, Donovan thinks it can take him down." Sanchez nodded grimly. "If it's in a safe, it might still be at his house. We should get a search warrant." Hayes agreed, but felt the weight of urgency pressing down on him. Ross was still unconscious, and time was slipping away. If Donovan's men knew about the safe, it wouldn't take long for them to try again. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Nurse Elena Morrow sat with Luke in the quiet corner of the waiting room. The boy had barely spoken since arriving, his small hands clutching his toy as if it were a lifeline. "Are you feeling okay, Luke?" Elena asked gently, kneeling beside the child. Luke nodded but didn't look up. His face was pale, his eyes tired and glassy. "Will Grandpa be okay?" Luke asked. He nodded, but tears spilled down his cheeks. Elena pulled him into a gentle hug. "You're so brave, Luke," she said softly. "Braver than most grown-ups I know." Back at the precinct, Grant sat silently in the interrogation room, his defiance unwavering. Hayes leaned against the glass of the observation room, his arms crossed. "We've got his phone and the messages about the safe," Sanchez said. "If we tie that to Ross's testimony in the embezzlement case, we've got motive. What's next?" Hayes straightened, his resolve hardening. "We find the safe before Donovan's men do." Detective Connor Hayes pulled into Ross Whitman's driveway, the mid-morning sun casting long shadows over the now empty house. The once warm and inviting home now stood as a hollow shell of itself, bearing the scars of the break-in. Hayes stepped out of his car, his jaw tight. The previous search had been thorough, but something felt unfinished. The cryptic messages from Liam Grant's phone about the safe gnawed at him, pushing him to give the house another look. Hayes approached the front door cautiously, his hand resting on the grip of his holstered weapon out of habit. The broken window had been boarded up, and the door creaked ominously as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, tinged with a faint metallic scent. The damage from the break-in was as they had left it. Overturned furniture, scattered papers, and broken glass. His steps echoed as he made his way toward the study, where the locked cabinet he had noticed during the initial search still stood. It had seemed insignificant at first, but now it felt like a glaring oversight. As Hayes stepped into the study, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Before he could answer, a faint popping sound reached his ears, followed by the acrid smell of smoke. His instincts screamed danger. Hayes spun around, racing toward the front door. Flames licked at the edges of the curtains in the living room, spreading rapidly as they consumed the dry fabric. Within seconds, thick smoke billowed through the house, turning the air heavy and choking. Hayes pulled his shirt over his mouth and nose, his eyes scanning for the source. Through the haze, he spotted a small metallic container tossed carelessly near the kitchen. A fuel canister. Someone had been here, and they wanted whatever Ross had hidden to be destroyed. Hayes bolted outside, coughing as he dialed 911. "This is Detective Hayes," he barked, his voice hoarse. "I'm at 427 Willow Lane. The house is on fire. Send the fire department immediately." The dispatcher acknowledged, and Hayes stepped back, watching helplessly as flames devoured the structure. The heat was intense, and the crackling of wood filled the air, drowning out the distant wail of sirens. Within minutes, fire trucks arrived, red lights slicing through the smoky haze. Firefighters leaped into action, unrolling hoses and dousing the flames with precision. Hayes stood on the curb, his fists clenched. His investigation had just gone up in literal smoke, unless there was something left to salvage. As the fire was extinguished, Hayes surveyed the damage. The house was barely recognizable, its roof caved in and walls blackened with soot. Smoke still rose in wisps as firefighters combed through the wreckage, ensuring no embers remained to reignite the flames. "Detective," one firefighter called, waving him over. "We found something in the rubble of the study." Hayes followed, stepping carefully over charred beams and debris. The firefighter pointed to a scorched but intact metal box, partially buried beneath a collapsed bookshelf. Hayes crouched, brushing away ash and debris to reveal a small safe. Its surface blackened but its structure uncompromised. "Looks like your arsonist missed something," the firefighter said. Hayes gave a tight nod, relief mingling with frustration. "Let's get this back to the precinct," he said, motioning for an evidence tech to handle the safe. The safe sat in the evidence room, its exterior a grim reminder of the destruction it had survived. Hayes watched as a specialist worked on opening it, using precision tools to bypass the lock. "What do you think's inside?" Sanchez asked, standing beside Hayes. "Something important enough to burn a house down for," Hayes said grimly. "If Ross was holding on to evidence that could dismantle Donovan's operation, it's in there." The lock finally gave way with a faint click, and the specialist lifted the lid. Inside were neatly stacked files, a flash drive, and a small leather-bound notebook. Hayes's breath caught as he reached for the notebook, flipping it open. The pages were filled with detailed financial records, annotated in Ross's meticulous handwriting. "Jackpot," Sanchez said, peering over his shoulder. Hayes nodded, but his expression remained serious. "This isn't just evidence. It's a map of Donovan's crimes. Every fraudulent transaction, every offshore account. It's all here." "And the flash drive?" Sanchez asked. Hayes handed it to the tech. "Let's get this analyzed immediately. Whatever's on it could be the nail in Donovan's coffin." As the evidence was catalogued, Hayes couldn't shake the gravity of the situation. Ross's unconscious state, the arson, and Grant's cryptic messages all pointed to a single truth. Donovan wasn't just trying to protect himself. He was sending a message. Hayes stared at the safe, now empty, its contents spread across the evidence table. He had what he needed to go after Donovan, but at what cost? Ross had risked everything to expose the truth, and the people he loved were caught in the crossfire. "Detective Hayes," the tech called, interrupting his thoughts. "The flash drive has encrypted files, but we're working on decrypting them now. Shouldn't take long." Hayes nodded, his mind already racing ahead. The safe had given them a vital lead, but Donovan's next move would be more dangerous than ever. This wasn't just about justice anymore, it was about survival. The hospital corridors were quiet that night, the soft hum of machinery blending with the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Ross lay motionless in his bed, still unconscious, his breathing steady but shallow. Nurse Elena Morrow worked quietly at her station, reviewing patient charts. It had been a long day, but she refused to let her guard down. The police presence outside the hospital offered some reassurance, but Elena couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was about to happen. In the shadows outside the hospital, two men dressed in dark clothing exited a sleek black sedan, their faces obscured by caps pulled low over their brows. They moved with purpose, their steps measured as they approached a side entrance. One of them, wiry with sharp eyes, carried a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "This has to be clean," the larger man muttered, his voice a low growl. "In and out. No mistakes." Inside, Luke sat curled in a chair in a private waiting area, his toy clutched tightly to his chest. His eyelids drooped, but sleep wouldn't come. The faint glow of the overhead lights made him feel small and exposed, even in the relative safety of the room. Elena had checked on him just moments ago, offering a soft smile and a warm blanket, but Luke couldn't shake the memory of the night his world had turned upside down. He glanced toward the hallway leading to his grandfather's room, the thought of Ross lying there alone filling him with unease. Quietly, Luke slipped off his chair and padded down the corridor, his small feet making almost no sound against the linoleum floor. In Ross's ward, the two men crept through the door, moving with eerie precision. The wiry man opened the duffel bag, pulling out a syringe filled with a clear liquid. "This ends tonight," he muttered, nodding toward Ross. The larger man stood by the door, keeping watch. "Hurry up," he hissed. "We're not alone here." As the wiry man approached Ross's bedside, Luke appeared in the doorway, his eyes widening in shock. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Then Luke let out a piercing scream, his voice echoing down the sterile corridor. The larger man cursed under his breath. "We're blown. Let's go." He grabbed his partner by the arm, yanking him toward the exit. Elena heard the scream and bolted from her station, adrenaline surging through her veins. She reached the ward just in time to see the two men slipping out the door. Her eyes darted to Luke, who stood frozen in place, tears streaming down his face. "Luke!" Elena cried, rushing to the child and pulling him into her arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now." Luke clung to Elena, sobbing. "They were going to hurt Grandpa," he wailed. Elena's heart raced as she scanned the room, her gaze landing on Ross's still form. He appeared unharmed, but the sight of the syringe left on the bedside table made Elena's stomach churn. She quickly pressed the emergency button on the wall, summoning security and medical staff. Within moments, the ward was filled with activity, nurses checking Ross's vitals while security guards swept the area for any sign of the intruders. Detective Connor Hayes arrived at the hospital minutes later, his face grim. He listened intently as Elena recounted what had happened, his jaw tightening with each detail. "They were professionals," Elena said, her voice steady despite the lingering fear. "They moved fast and knew exactly what they were doing." If Luke hadn't screamed, Hayes placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did everything right," he said, and Luke's bravery might have saved Ross's life. Luke, still clutching his toy, peeked out from behind Elena. "Are they going to come back?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Hayes crouched down to his level, his expression softening. "Not if I can help it," he said firmly. "We're going to make sure you and your grandpa are safe." Hayes immediately coordinated with hospital security, doubling the number of officers stationed around Ross's room. He also arranged for plainclothes detectives to patrol the hospital, ensuring no one could slip through undetected. Back at the precinct, Hayes's team worked around the clock, analyzing the syringe left behind by the intruders. "This is Donovan's work," Sanchez said, her voice laced with anger. "He's trying to tie up loose ends." Hayes nodded, his mind racing. The evidence against Donovan was mounting, but so was the danger. Ross's survival wasn't just a matter of justice. It was the only way to ensure Donovan faced the consequences of his actions. As the hospital quieted once more, Hayes stood outside Ross's room, watching over Luke and Elena as they sat together. The little boy had finally fallen asleep, his head resting against Elena's shoulder. Hayes's phone buzzed, and he answered quickly. "Hayes, it was Captain Bellamy. I heard about the attack. How's Whitman?" "He's stable," Hayes said, "but this was close. Too close. Donovan's not letting up. We need to move faster." Bellamy agreed. "What's the status on the evidence from the safe?" "The tech team is still decrypting the files," Hayes replied. "Once we have the full picture, we'll have everything we need to bring Donovan down." "And Ross?" Bellamy asked. Hayes glanced through the window at the unconscious man. "He has to wake up," he said quietly. "He has to." Detective Connor Hayes leaned over a detailed map of the city sprawled across the precinct's operations table. He traced his finger over a series of industrial sites on the outskirts. His team gathered around him. The pressure to dismantle Donovan's syndicate had reached its peak, especially after the brazen hospital attack. They needed to strike hard and fast before Donovan could regroup. "Here's the plan," Hayes began, his voice steady but urgent. "We leak false information through Grant's phone, making it seem like we're transferring Ross's evidence to a secure federal facility." Officer Jenna Sanchez nodded, catching on. "And we make sure Donovan's men intercept that intel." Hayes smirked. "Exactly. They'll think it's their last chance to destroy the evidence. When they come for it, we'll be ready." The fake transfer was meticulously staged. A convoy of unmarked vehicles, flanked by police escorts, departed the precinct with an empty evidence box. The convoy's route was intentionally erratic, weaving through the city to make it appear genuine. At each checkpoint, updates were deliberately leaked, ensuring Donovan's men could follow the breadcrumbs. Meanwhile, Hayes's tactical team positioned themselves at the final destination, an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. It was a sprawling, desolate site, perfect for an ambush. Officers in plain clothes mingled nearby, posing as workers or loiterers, their weapons concealed but ready. As night fell, a convoy of black SUVs crept toward the warehouse. Dom, Donovan's enforcer, sat in the lead vehicle, his sharp eyes scanning for any sign of a setup. "This better not be a trap," he growled into his earpiece. "Keep your eyes open." The SUVs came to a stop near the warehouse's loading dock. Dom stepped out, flanked by a handful of armed men, their movements tense and deliberate. They approached the warehouse, finding the convoy vehicles parked inside, seemingly unguarded. "There it is," Dom muttered, spotting the evidence box resting on a table. He gestured to one of his men. "Check it." The man hurried forward, prying open the box. It was empty. "It's a setup," he shouted, just as floodlights blazed to life, illuminating the entire area. "Police, drop your weapons." Hayes's voice boomed through a megaphone as officers emerged from the shadows, guns drawn. Dom snarled, raising his hands slightly but not letting go of his weapon. "You think you're smart, huh?" he spat. "This doesn't end with me." "Maybe not," Hayes said, stepping forward, "but it ends tonight." Dom's men exchanged uneasy glances, their grip on their weapons faltering. One by one, they began to lower their guns, realizing they were outmatched. But Dom wasn't ready to surrender. With a sudden sharp movement, he raised his weapon, aiming for Hayes. Before he could fire, a sharp crack echoed through the warehouse as Sanchez fired, hitting Dom in the shoulder. He cried out, dropping his weapon and collapsing to his knees. "Secure him," Hayes ordered, and officers swarmed Dom, cuffing him as he glared defiantly. With Dom in custody, the rest of Donovan's men were rounded up, their vehicles searched for additional evidence. The sting operation had been a resounding success, dealing a critical blow to Donovan's network. Back at the precinct, Hayes interrogated Dom, using the weight of his capture to press for information. At first, Dom remained tight-lipped, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Faced with the inevitability of a long prison sentence, he finally broke. Donovan knew Ross had dirt on him, Dom admitted. He thought he kept it all at his house. When we couldn't find it there, he panicked. The hospital hit. That was his last-ditch effort. Hayes pressed. "Where is he hiding?" Dom hesitated, then sighed. "There's a safe house on the east side. He's probably there, trying to figure out his next move." As Hayes's team pieced together the information from Dom and the evidence collected, it became clear that Donovan's empire was crumbling. The raid on the warehouse had not only captured key players, but also uncovered additional leads, financial documents and burner phones that linked Donovan to a web of criminal activity. "The documents from Ross's safe are the final nail in the coffin," Sanchez said, handing Hayes a file. "We've got enough to charge Donovan with racketeering, extortion, and attempted murder." Hayes nodded, his resolve firm. "Let's finish this." The safe house was a modest two-story building on the outskirts of town, surrounded by overgrown trees and a rusted chain-link fence. It was unassuming, the kind of place meant to blend in and avoid attention. But the police knew better. As the convoy of unmarked vehicles approached, officers moved swiftly into position. Hayes led the charge, his gun drawn, as he signaled for the team to breach the front door. "Go," he commanded, and the tactical team sprang into action. The door splintered under the force of the battering ram, and officers poured into the building. Inside, the scene was chaotic. Donovan's men scrambled, caught off guard by the sudden assault. One attempted to flee through a back window but was quickly intercepted by officers stationed outside. Hayes moved with precision, clearing room after room until he reached the study. There, sitting behind a cluttered desk, was Robert Donovan. The once composed and untouchable businessman now looked disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled and his eyes bloodshot. "Detective Hayes," Donovan drawled, attempting to maintain his arrogance. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Hayes didn't flinch. "It's over, Donovan." "Hands where I can see them." Donovan smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "Actually," Hayes said, stepping closer, "I know exactly who you are. And I have everything I need to bury you." Donovan's bravado faltered as two officers flanked him, pulling him from his chair and cuffing his wrists. He struggled briefly but quickly realized resistance was futile. "You're making a mistake," Donovan hissed as he was led out of the room. "This isn't over." Hayes followed, his expression cold. "Oh, it's over. And you're going to spend a long time answering for what you've done." The team continued their sweep of the house, uncovering additional evidence: ledgers, burner phones, and encrypted files. It was enough to solidify the case against Donovan and dismantle his operation entirely. Back at the hospital, Nurse Elena Morrow sat at Ross's bedside, her hand resting gently on the older man's arm. Luke dozed in a nearby chair, his toy clutched tightly to his chest. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft beep of the heart monitor. Ross's eyes fluttered open, his gaze unfocused at first. Elena leaned in, her voice soft but urgent. "Ross, can you hear me?" Ross blinked, his eyes slowly focusing on Elena. "Where am I?" "You're at the hospital," Elena explained gently. "You've been unconscious, but you're safe now." Ross's eyes widened as memories flooded back. "Luke, is he okay?" Elena nodded, her tone reassuring. "He's fine. He's right here, and he's been so brave." Ross's shoulders sagged with relief, but the weight of everything he'd endured still lingered. "They came for me," he whispered. "They wanted the evidence." Detective Hayes arrived at the hospital not long after, relieved to see Ross awake. He sat beside him, his tone serious but compassionate. "Mr. Whitman, we've arrested Donovan. We have evidence tying him to the attack on your home and the hospital incident. But your testimony will be the nail in the coffin." Ross hesitated, his hands trembling. "Testify? You want me to stand in court and face him?" "I know it's a lot to ask," Hayes admitted, "but you're the key to taking him down. If we don't stop him now, he'll find a way to rebuild." Ross glanced at Luke, who had woken and was listening intently, the boy's wide eyes filled with hope and trust. Ross took a deep breath, steeling himself. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "For Luke, and for everyone else he's hurt." Hayes nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "You're doing the right thing. We'll make sure you're protected." As Donovan sat in a holding cell, his arrogance began to crumble. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the whispers among his men about defecting to save themselves only added to his downfall. Hayes left the precinct that night with a renewed sense of purpose. Ross's bravery and Luke's resilience reminded him why he fought so hard for justice. They weren't just names in a case file. They were people whose lives had been torn apart and deserved to be made whole again. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as the trial of Robert Donovan began. Journalists filled the gallery, their notepads and cameras ready to capture every moment of the high-profile case. The public had followed the story with fascination, and now all eyes were on the brave whistleblower and the detective who had unraveled the web of corruption. Ross Whitman sat at the prosecution's table, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Though his face still bore faint traces of his ordeal, his demeanor was resolute. Across the aisle, Donovan sat with his legal team, his expression cold and calculating. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence, his arrogance had not wavered. Detective Connor Hayes sat nearby, reviewing his notes. He caught Ross's eye and gave him a small nod of encouragement. Ross returned the gesture, a quiet exchange of determination between two people who had fought tirelessly for this moment. The prosecutor, a sharp-witted woman named Ellen Monroe, wasted no time presenting the case. She began by detailing the series of events leading to Donovan's arrest, emphasizing Ross's courage in exposing his fraudulent activities. The recovered documents were introduced as evidence, their contents projected on a large screen for the jury to see. "These records," Monroe stated, "show not only the extent of Robert Donovan's embezzlement, but also his direct involvement in orchestrating violent attacks to silence those who dared to oppose him. Ross was the first to take the stand, recounting his discovery of the fraudulent activities within Donovan's company and his decision to come forward despite knowing the risks. His voice wavered slightly as he described the night of the attack, but he held his composure, his resolve shining through. "When they broke into my house," Ross said, his gaze steady on the jury, "they weren't just looking to scare me. They were looking for the evidence I'd kept hidden. They were willing to destroy everything to protect themselves, even if it meant getting rid of me." Donovan's defense attorney tried to rattle him during cross-examination, suggesting his actions were driven by personal vendetta. Ross responded calmly but firmly, "This was never about revenge. It was about doing what's right." Next, Detective Hayes took the stand. The prosecutor walked him through the events leading to Donovan's capture. "Officer Hayes," Monroe began, "can you describe your initial encounter with Mr. Whitman?" Hayes nodded, his gaze briefly flicking toward Ross. "It was a quiet evening when I noticed Mr. Whitman's grandson, Luke, burst into the ER. His grandfather had collapsed, and Luke said there had been loud noises and yelling. That led us to the scene, and as we investigated, it became clear this was no random attack." He went on to detail the series of investigations, the sting operation, and the brazen hospital attack. Throughout this case, Hayes concluded, Ross Whitman's fears were validated. The evidence he provided exposed a criminal network that spanned decades. Detective Lisa Hayes was next, her testimony reinforcing the case's foundation. She meticulously presented the bank records, the incriminating documents found in Ross's safe, and the additional evidence seized during the warehouse raid. These records, she said, holding up financial data, tie Donovan to multiple shell companies and implicate several associates in related crimes. This was a deep-rooted network, designed to intimidate and silence. The defense attempted to undermine the validity of the evidence, but each time, Ellen Monroe dismantled their claims with calm precision. "The evidence wasn't just stumbled upon," she said. "It was verified, cross-referenced, and corroborated by multiple sources. This is not a theory. It's fact." The most damning moment came when a former associate of Donovan took the stand, having agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. He detailed Donovan's role in orchestrating the violence and intimidation, describing the lengths to which the syndicate went to protect its secrets. Donovan called the shots, the man admitted, his voice shaking. He kept everyone in line, made sure the money kept flowing, and when Ross Whitman started talking, he ordered us to shut him up. The courtroom fell silent at the confession, the gravity of the statement sinking in. Donovan's legal team squirmed, sensing their case was crumbling. In her closing arguments, Ellen Monroe spoke directly to the jury, her voice steady and compelling. "This trial isn't just about Robert Donovan or his associates," she said. "It's about the countless lives impacted by greed and corruption. It's about Ross Whitman, who risked everything to expose the truth. And it's about justice that has been delayed for far too long." She paused, letting her words resonate. "The evidence is clear, and the testimony undeniable. It's time to hold these men accountable." The jury deliberated for hours. The tension in the courthouse was palpable. When they finally returned, the foreman stood, expression solemn, and read the verdict. "We find the defendant, Robert Donovan, guilty on all counts." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Ross closed his eyes, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Hayes and Dina exchanged a look of satisfaction, knowing their work had paid off. The sentencing came swiftly. Donovan received 20 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The criminal network he had built was dismantled, its secrets laid bare for the world to see. As the courtroom emptied, Sean approached Ross. "You did it," he said quietly. "You brought them down." Ross smiled faintly, tears glistening in his eyes. "We did it," he corrected. "I couldn't have done this without all of you." Sean nodded. "Now it's time for you to rest. You've earned it." The days following the trial were marked by a sense of quiet resolution. Ross Whitman, though physically fragile, began the slow process of rebuilding his life. His small home in Willow Creek, once a fortress of fear, became a haven of peace. Sunlight streamed through the freshly cleaned windows, illuminating old photographs and keepsakes that now symbolized resilience rather than regret. Ross found comfort in his old routines, especially his neglected garden, which became his sanctuary once again. Each morning, he donned his wide-brimmed hat and gloves, tending to the vibrant blooms that had once brought him joy. Neighbors who had once watched him anxiously from afar now stopped by, offering smiles and freshly baked goods. Luke, too, seemed to thrive. He made friends at his new school and discovered a love for reading, something Elena had encouraged during their long hours at the hospital. Detective Hayes was a frequent visitor, his patrol car often seen parked outside Ross's house. He had grown protective of them both, their bond forged in shared adversity. Over cups of tea on the porch, Ross would recount stories of his life before the ordeal, the good times overshadowed by Donovan's betrayal but still worth remembering. "You know," Ross said one afternoon, hands cradling a warm mug, "I spent so many years blaming myself for staying silent about what I found. But now I realize I didn't stay silent forever, and that has to count for something, right?" Hayes nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It counts for everything. You faced fears most people never will. You didn't just speak up. You helped dismantle an entire network." Ross smiled faintly, eyes misty. "I couldn't have done it alone. You all gave me the courage to keep going." They exchanged a few more words before Hayes continued his route, the warmth of their conversation lingering as he drove. He reflected on the journey they had shared. The night Ross's grandson, Luke, stumbled into the ER. The cryptic note that set everything in motion, the fear that gave way to justice. As he turned onto a familiar street, the sights of Willow Creek reminded him why he served. Children riding their bikes, a young couple walking their dog, an elderly neighbor chatting over a picket fence. He felt a renewed sense of purpose for his role in this community. His radio crackled, pulling him back to the present. Another call came through, and he responded with practiced calm, his voice steady and assured. As he headed toward his next destination, he carried with him the certainty that his work mattered, that even in the smallest moments he could make a difference. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like. If you haven't already, subscribe for more. When a dedicated school nurse notices a quiet first grader wearing the same ratty winter hat every single day despite soaring temperatures, her professional concern transforms into mounting dread. What begins as simple worry about a child's comfort soon reveals a devastating reality that multiple adults have overlooked for weeks. Her decision to finally intervene might be seen as overstepping boundaries, but the horrifying secret hidden beneath that shabby blue hat could cost far more than just one childhood if she stays silent. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe in the power of observant school staff to change lives, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Catherine Delaney had been the school nurse at Westbrook Elementary for 9 years. At 41, she developed a reputation for both her gentle manner with frightened children and her fierce advocacy when their needs weren't being met. Her office was a safe haven, colorful posters about hygiene and nutrition brightening the clinical space, a collection of stuffed animals offering comfort during temperature checks or minor injuries, and a special drawer stocked with spare clothing for inevitable accidents and spills. The children trusted her, and the teachers relied on her expertise not just for scraped knees and fevers, but for spotting the subtle signs when something deeper was amiss. The first day of May brought unusually warm weather to their small Midwestern town. Spring had arrived suddenly after a prolonged winter, sending temperatures into the 80s and prompting most students to arrive in shorts and t-shirts. Kathy had prepared for the seasonal shift by stocking extra water bottles and reminding teachers to watch for signs of heat exhaustion during outdoor activities. It was during the mandated vision screening for first and third graders that Kathy first took particular notice of Tyler Graham. She'd seen the 6-year-old before, of course, treating him for a scraped elbow in September, checking his temperature during a December flu outbreak, but something about him seemed different today. While his classmates had transitioned to warm weather clothing, Tyler sat quietly in line wearing long sleeves and the same tattered blue knit hat he'd worn all winter, pulled low over his ears and forehead. The hat looked not just seasonally inappropriate but uncomfortably warm in the heated building. "Tyler, would you like to take your hat off while you wait?" she suggested kindly when he entered her office for his screening. "It's pretty warm today." The boy immediately shrank back, small hands reaching up to secure the hat more firmly. "No, thank you," he whispered, eyes fixed on the floor. "I need to keep it on." "Are you cold?" Kathy asked, mentally reviewing possible medical conditions that might affect temperature regulation. Tyler shook his head slightly but offered no further explanation. Respecting his obvious discomfort with the subject, Kathy proceeded with the vision screening without pushing further. She noted, however, how carefully Tyler handled the hat during the test, ensuring it remained in place even when leaning forward to read the eye chart. She also noticed his wincing when the hat shifted slightly, as if the movement caused pain. Later that afternoon, during her lunch break, Kathy mentioned Tyler to his teacher, Sarah Lawson, a dedicated educator in her early 30s who'd been at Westbrook for 5 years. "I've been concerned about him too," Sarah admitted, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "The hat thing is odd. He absolutely refuses to remove it, even during PE. Coach Peterson finally stopped asking after Tyler, had a complete meltdown about it in April." "How long has this been going on?" Kathy asked. Sarah frowned, calculating. "He showed up with it after spring break in March and hasn't taken it off since. I assumed it was some kind of security object at first. You know how kids can get attached to random items. I checked with his previous teacher, and she said he'd never worn it before March." "What do you know about his home situation?" "Not much," Sarah admitted. "His mother died a couple years ago, cancer, I think. He lives with his father and older brother. The father's been to one conference, seemed intense. Very focused on Tyler following rules, not causing trouble. The brother picks him up most days. Tyler's quiet, does his work, doesn't make friends easily but isn't actively rejected by peers either. He just fades into the background. Any changes in behavior besides the hat? He's more withdrawn than he was in the fall. Jumps at loud noises. His academic performance has slipped a bit too. Nothing dramatic, but noticeable." The conversation left Kathy unsettled. While children certainly developed attachments to comfort objects, the timing and Tyler's physical reactions when the hat shifted suggested something beyond simple preference. She resolved to watch him more carefully. Throughout the next week, Kathy made a point of casually observing Tyler during lunch periods and recess. His pattern remained consistent, hat firmly in place despite the climbing temperatures, long sleeves even on the warmest days, minimal interaction with peers, and a noticeable tendency to flinch when adults approached suddenly. More concerning, she spotted what appeared to be a small bloodstain on the back of his hat one afternoon, prompting her to check his records for any reported head injuries. Finding none, her worry deepened. On Friday, Kathy decided to call Tyler's home, using a routine health update as pretext. The phone was answered by a gruff male voice identifying himself as James Graham, Tyler's father. "Mr. Graham, I'm just checking in about the seasonal allergies we've noted in Tyler's file," Kathy explained pleasantly. "We're seeing a lot of symptoms with the spring weather." "He hasn't complained," Graham replied shortly. "He knows better than to whine about minor discomforts." The response, while not overtly alarming, struck Kathy as dismissive. "I've also noticed he's been wearing his winter hat despite the warm weather. Is he experiencing any scalp sensitivity or other issues I should be aware of?" A pause followed, just long enough to register as significant. "The hat is not a medical concern," Graham stated firmly. "Tyler understands he's to keep it on. Family decision. If that's all." "Just one more thing," Kathy persisted. "I noticed what looked like a small stain on the back of Tyler's hat. Has he had any injuries at home recently?" "Boys get minor scrapes all the time, Ms. Delaney. Unless he's requiring medical attention at school, his minor injuries are handled at home. We don't need to waste your time with every little bump." Graham's tone had sharpened notably. "Now, if there's nothing else, I need to get back to work." The call ended abruptly, leaving Kathy more concerned than before. Consulting the school's records, she discovered that Tyler had missed 3 days immediately after spring break, absences explained by a vague family issue rather than illness or vacation. The timing aligned precisely with the appearance of the hat. But nothing could prepare Kathy for how deep the reality went, or how her simple observations would uncover a situation that others had overlooked for weeks. On Monday morning, Sarah Lawson appeared in the health office before classes began, her expression troubled. "Tyler's in my classroom right now," she said quietly. "He's upset. He says his head hurts, but he won't let me look at it or take off the hat. He's almost in tears, but insisting he's fine." "I'll come check on him," Kathy replied, gathering her first aid kit. As they walked toward the classroom, Sarah provided more context. "His brother dropped him off today instead of the father. I noticed them arguing in the car before Tyler got out. The brother seemed upset about something." In the classroom, they found Tyler sitting alone, small shoulders hunched, hands pressed against the sides of his hat. When he saw them enter, he straightened immediately, forcing a neutral expression that no 6-year-old should have mastered. "Tyler, Ms. Lawson says your head is hurting. Can I help?" Kathy approached slowly, keeping her voice gentle and even. "It's okay now," Tyler insisted, though the strain in his voice betrayed him. "I don't need help." "I think we should check anyway," Kathy replied, kneeling to his eye level. "Sometimes even small hurts need attention. Would it be all right if I just feel your forehead for fever? You can keep your hat on for that." Tyler hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. As Kathy placed her palm against his forehead, she noted several concerning signs: elevated temperature, the slight tremor in his small body, and most alarmingly, a faint but distinct odor coming from beneath the hat. Having worked in a hospital before school nursing, she recognized it immediately: the smell of infection. "Tyler, I think we need to take a look under your hat," she said gently but firmly. "I'm worried you might have an infection that needs treatment." Panic flashed across the boy's face. "I can't," he whispered. "Dad said I have to keep it on no matter what. He'll be really mad." "Your health is most important," Kathy assured him, making a quick decision. "Let's go to my office where it's private, and we can call your dad after we check. Okay?" After a moment's hesitation, Tyler followed Kathy to the health office, Sarah accompanying them with a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. Once inside, Kathy closed the door and prepared a treatment area, laying out gauze, antiseptic, and gloves while explaining each item to Tyler in child-appropriate terms. "I need to see what's hurting under your hat," she explained. "I promise to be very gentle, and whatever we find will help make it better. You're not in any trouble." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "Dad said I deserved it," he whispered, "for being bad. And Jake, my brother, said if anyone found out, they'd take me away and it would be my fault." Kathy and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. "Tyler, whatever happened is not your fault," Sarah assured him. "We just want to help you feel better." After several more minutes of gentle coaxing, Tyler finally gave a small nod of permission. With careful movements, Kathy began to lift the hat, stopping immediately when Tyler winced. "It's stuck," he whimpered. "It hurts when it pulls." "I'm going to get the hat a little wet to help it come off without pulling," Kathy explained, dampening some gauze with warm saline solution. Slowly, methodically, she worked the moisture around the edges of the hat, gradually loosening what she now realized was dried blood and exudate adhering the fabric to the boy's scalp. When the hat finally came free, Kathy gasped involuntarily. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a similar reaction. Tyler's head revealed a horror they hadn't anticipated. Not just bruising or a single injury, but systematic, deliberate damage. His scalp bore multiple circular burns in various stages of healing, some fresh and weeping, others partially scabbed, many clearly infected. The pattern and size suggested cigarette burns, dozens of them, covering the crown and back of his head where hair would normally have hidden them. Sections of his hair had been roughly cut or burned away, creating a patchy landscape of trauma across his small head. "Oh, Tyler," Kathy breathed, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the rage and heartbreak surging through her. "Thank you for being brave and letting us help you. These need medicine to heal properly." Tyler sat absolutely still, silent tears streaming down his face. Not from the pain of the examination, Kathy suspected, but from the relief of finally having his secret burden shared. "Did your dad do this?" Sarah asked gently. Tyler nodded almost imperceptibly. "When he gets mad and drinks the special soda. He says it helps him think of new punishments, so I'll learn better." As Kathy began the careful process of cleaning and documenting the wounds, Tyler gradually revealed more. How the abuse had escalated after his brother Jake left for college, returning only for spring break. How their father had begun disciplining Tyler for increasingly minor infractions like spilled milk or homework errors. How the hat had been his father's solution to hide the evidence when Tyler's teacher had scheduled a conference in March. "Jake saw my head when he came home for break," Tyler explained in the matter-of-fact tone children sometimes adopt for the most horrific circumstances. "He got really mad at Dad. They had a big fight. Jake said he was going to tell someone, but Dad said they'd take me away to a bad place where no one would love me if Jake told. So Jake bought me this hat instead and said I had to keep it on until the spots healed." The gradual revelation painted a clear picture. A father's abuse intensifying after the older son's departure for college. That same son returning to discover the situation and attempting a misguided protection strategy rather than proper intervention. Today's argument between the brothers likely stemmed from Jake's recognition that the wounds weren't healing and the situation was worsening. School protocol for such discoveries was clear. As a mandated reporter, Kathy was legally obligated to contact Child Protective Services immediately. She asked the school secretary to call the principal to her office while she continued treating Tyler's wounds, applying antibiotic ointment to the infected areas. Principal Diane Wilson arrived quickly, her normally composed expression faltering momentarily at the sight of Tyler's injuries. With practiced efficiency, she initiated the school's child protection protocol, contacting both CPS and the police while arranging for Tyler to remain comfortably in the health office. "You're being so brave," Kathy assured Tyler as they waited. "None of this should have happened to you, and we're going to make sure you're safe from now on." Within an hour, a CPS caseworker and police officer had arrived. Tyler's injuries were photographed, his statement recorded with appropriate sensitivity for his age, and arrangements made for immediate medical evaluation at the Children's Hospital. Throughout the process, either Kathy or Sarah remained with him, providing reassurance and advocating for his comfort. When it came time for Tyler to leave with the caseworker, he looked up at Kathy with worried eyes. "Will I have to go back home after the hospital?" "No, sweetheart," she assured him. "You'll go somewhere safe while everything gets sorted out." "But I won't have anywhere to live," he said, his voice small but matter-of-fact. "Dad said no one else would want me because I'm bad." Sarah knelt beside him, her eyes fierce with protective determination. "Tyler, you are not bad. What happened to you was wrong, and none of it was your fault. There are many people who would be happy to have you in their homes and lives." The following days brought a whirlwind of activity. James Graham was arrested and charged with child abuse. Tyler's brother Jake, a 19-year-old college freshman, provided a statement confirming he discovered the abuse during spring break, but had been convinced by his father that reporting it would result in Tyler entering the foster system, where he might face worse situations. His misguided attempt to protect his brother by concealing the evidence while trying to convince their father to stop had simply allowed the abuse to continue. Tyler spent 3 days in the Children's Hospital, receiving treatment for multiple infected burns, malnutrition, and psychological trauma. His physical injuries, while serious, would heal with proper care. The emotional wounds would require more extensive intervention. Kathy visited Tyler in the hospital, bringing a soft, colorful beanie from her collection of donated items. "Only if you want it," she assured him, recognizing that hats might now carry negative associations. "Your head might feel cold without your hair, and this one is much more comfortable." Tyler hesitated, then accepted the gift with the hint of a smile, the first Kathy had seen from him. "It doesn't hurt like the other one," he observed, carefully trying it on with the help of his nurse. The question of Tyler's placement after discharge became increasingly pressing. With no mother, a father in custody, and a brother legally too young and financially unable to assume guardianship, foster care seemed the inevitable next step. However, during a team meeting with hospital social workers, an unexpected alternative emerged. Sarah Lawson, who had visited Tyler daily since his hospitalization, asked to speak privately with the lead social worker. When she returned to the meeting, her expression was both nervous and determined. "I'd like to be considered as a potential foster placement for Tyler," she announced. "I'm already certified as a foster parent. I completed the process last year, and I have a strong connection with him as his teacher." The revelation surprised Kathy, who hadn't known about Sarah's foster certification. Later, over coffee in the hospital cafeteria, Sarah explained, "My sister was in foster care before my parents adopted her," she said. "I've always planned to foster or adopt someday. I got certified last summer, but I haven't had a placement yet because I was waiting for the right timing." She paused, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I know it's unusual to foster a current student, but Tyler needs stability and familiar faces right now, not more disruption." The process wasn't simple. Ethical considerations regarding teacher-student boundaries needed addressing, and accelerated home studies were conducted, but 2 weeks after his hospitalization, Tyler was tentatively placed in Sarah's care as an emergency foster placement. Kathy continued to provide support, both professionally monitoring Tyler's physical recovery and personally helping Sarah navigate the challenges of suddenly becoming a foster parent. Tyler's initial adjustment was tentative. Years of abuse had taught him to be wary of adult care and affection. He carefully tested boundaries, sometimes deliberately breaking minor rules as if expecting harsh punishment, other times becoming anxiously perfectionist about household routines. Sarah met each challenge with steady patience and appropriate professional support, including trauma-informed therapy for Tyler and foster parent support groups for herself. The school made accommodations as well, transferring Tyler to another first-grade classroom to maintain appropriate teacher-student boundaries while Sarah fostered him. By midsummer, the changes in Tyler were remarkable. The physical wounds had largely healed, though some scarring remained. His hair was growing back, filling in the damaged areas. More significantly, his emotional healing had begun. Tentative smiles appearing more frequently, moments of genuine childish enthusiasm emerging during play, the hypervigilance gradually relaxing into more age-appropriate awareness. Kathy, who continued checking in regularly, arrived one July afternoon to find Tyler in Sarah's backyard, running through a sprinkler without a hat, laughing as water sprayed in all directions. The sight brought unexpected tears to her eyes, this joyful, carefree child barely resembling the frightened boy who had sat so still while she treated his wounds. "He still has nightmares," Sarah confided as they watched from the patio, "and certain triggers can cause setbacks. But the therapist says he's making incredible progress." "And you?" Kathy asked. "How are you handling everything?" Sarah smiled, her eyes never leaving Tyler as he discovered the delight of jumping directly over the sprinkler. "It's challenging, of course, but I've never been more certain about anything." Actually, she hesitated, then continued, "I've spoken with the social worker about potentially adopting him if his father's rights are terminated. It's premature to discuss with Tyler, but I wanted you to know." As summer transitioned to fall, the legal proceedings against James Graham continued. He eventually accepted a plea deal resulting in a lengthy prison sentence. Jake, who had initially faced potential charges for failing to report the abuse, received immunity in exchange for his testimony and continued to rebuild his relationship with Tyler through supervised visits. By Christmas, Tyler had been in Sarah's home for 7 months, thriving in school, now in a different teacher's second-grade classroom, engaging in play therapy, and gradually learning to trust that care could come without conditions or cruelty. The adoption process had officially begun, with a court date set for finalization in spring. Kathy, who had become a regular visitor in their home, brought Tyler a special gift that Christmas. A framed photograph of him smiling broadly during the school's fall festival, hair fully regrown, eyes bright with joy. "To remember how far you've come," she told him. Tyler studied the photo thoughtfully. "I don't need a hat anymore," he observed. "No," Kathy agreed. "You don't need to hide anything." Later, as Tyler showed Sarah's parents, visiting for the holidays, his new collection of model dinosaurs, Sarah pulled Kathy aside. "The adoption hearing is set for March 15th, she said quietly. "Exactly 1 year after I first noticed something was wrong with the hat. I'd really like you to be there." "I wouldn't miss it," Kathy assured her. The adoption day arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine and gentle breezes replacing the last remnants of winter, as if nature itself were celebrating new beginnings. The courthouse overflowed with supporters, school staff who had helped identify and address the abuse, therapists who had guided Tyler's recovery, social workers who had coordinated his care, and new friends from Sarah's neighborhood and church. Tyler, dressed in his first-ever suit, complete with dinosaur print tie he'd selected himself, stood proudly beside Sarah as the judge made the adoption official. When asked if he understood what was happening, he nodded solemnly. "Ms. Lawson, Mom is going to be my forever mom, for real and legal," he explained seriously. "And nobody can take me away or hurt me anymore." "That's exactly right," the judge confirmed with a smile. "Congratulations to both of you." The courtroom erupted in applause as Sarah knelt to embrace her now official son. Kathy, watching from the front row, felt the familiar sting of tears, not from the horror of discovery this time, but from the beauty of witnessing healing made complete. The celebration continued at Sarah and Tyler's home, where a forever family party featured Tyler's favorite foods, games, and a special cake decorated with dinosaurs wearing party hats. As guests mingled in the backyard, Kathy found herself standing beside Tyler, who was taking a brief break from the excitement. "How does it feel to be officially adopted?" she asked him. Tyler considered the question with the thoughtfulness that still sometimes made him seem older than his years. "Good. Safe," he paused, then added, "When my first mom died and it was just me and Dad and sometimes Jake, I thought that was my forever. Even when the bad things started happening, I didn't know it could change." "That's what adults are supposed to do," Kathy told him gently. "Notice when something's wrong and help make it better. Like when you took off my hat even though I was scared." "Exactly like that." Tyler nodded, absorbing this. "Miss Sarah, Mom says you're the real hero of my story. That if you hadn't been so," he frowned, searching for the word, "persistent, I might still be wearing that hat." "Heroes come in many forms," Kathy replied. "Your mom saw something wrong too. So did your brother eventually. And you were brave enough to let us help when the time came." Across the yard, Sarah was waving Tyler over to help cut the cake. He grinned, an unguarded, joyful expression that transformed his entire face, and ran to join her, naturally accepting her one-armed hug as he took his place beside her. Watching them together, Kathy reflected on the journey from that first observation of a too-warm hat on a spring day to this moment of family solidified through challenge and love. In her years of nursing, she had witnessed many wounds, some visible, others hidden beneath careful disguises. The physical injuries, as horrific as they'd been, had healed more quickly than the invisible ones. Those deeper wounds required not just medical intervention but the steady, consistent message that Tyler was worthy of protection, capable of trust, and deserving of unconditional love. As the newly official mother and son laughed together over the cake cutting, their connected joy radiant for all to see, Kathy understood. They hadn't just stopped the darkness in Tyler's life. They had helped create an entirely new story, one where safety wasn't temporary, where love didn't come with conditions, and where a little boy no longer needed a hat to hide the painful truth of his existence. The adoption marked not an ending but a beginning, the start of a childhood reclaimed, a future unburdened by the weight of secrets, a family formed not through biology but through the choice to see, protect, and cherish. In that silent moment of observation, Kathy recognized the profound truth that had guided her nursing career. Healing wasn't just about treating visible wounds, but about creating the conditions where whole persons could flourish in safety and love. And in the laughter of a once silent child, now free to simply be a boy without fear or hiding, she heard the most beautiful confirmation that some stories, even those with the darkest beginnings, could find their way to the light. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.